Torreon, Coahuila, 1962. A place carved by drought and dust, where every gust of wind carries whispers of the dead. The streets are cracked like old bones. The heat doesn't just burn skin, it scorches futures. Here, boys didn't dream of being astronauts. They dreamed of surviving. Vicente Carrillo Fuentes was born into this, not into wealth, not into hope, but into legacy. A family already soaked in shadows. The Carrillo Fuentes clan had ties to smugglers, to federales, to men who shook hands with both God and the devil in the same day. Vicente was the fourth son, not the first to fight, not the first to bleed, but the one who listened. His voice, quiet, his movements, measured. In a family of wolves, he was the one who watched the moon, timing the hunt with precision. His older brother, Amado, El Señor de los Cielos, was already rewriting the rules of the drug game. He filled planes with cocaine, built airstrips in the jungle, moved product like a general moves armies. Amado was the storm. Vicente, he was the stillness before it. While Amado conquered the skies, Vicente studied the earth, the patterns, the roots, the silences between gunshots. He learned early that power wasn't in who shouts the loudest, but in who makes the rules others follow without question. Because in Mexico's underworld, fame is a bullet magnet. Attention gets you killed. But silence can move mountains. Vicente didn't want to be feared by the crowd. He wanted to be obeyed by the right people. In whispers, in nods, in coded phone calls. He wasn't building a name. He was building a structure. Invisible, unshakable, inevitable. And long before he took over a cartel, Vicente Carrillo Fuentes understood the first truth of the narco world. If you can't be seen, you can't be stopped. July 1997, Mexico City. In a private hospital room, under fluorescent lights and a false name, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies, bled out on the operating table. A ghost born of jet fuel and fear died chasing a new face. The drug world froze, phones lit up, bodies dropped. Because when the king of the skies dies, every predator looks up. The vultures circled fast. Rival cartels, law enforcement, old friends who smelled opportunity. The Juarez cartel was leaderless, vulnerable, rich. But before the throne got cold, Vicente stepped in. No press conference, no fireworks, just a whisper through the underworld. He's in charge now. Vicente didn't inherit a business. He inherited a battlefield. Amado had turned Juarez into the crown jewel of drug corridors. Billions moved through it every year, through tunnels, trains, airports, and crooked officials. But now, that kingdom was exposed. Vicente knew what came next. He didn't flinch. He didn't run. He fortified. He purged disloyal captains. He doubled down on bribes. He reorganized the chain of command with the cold logic of a CEO and the heart of a butcher. And then, he disappeared. Not literally, strategically. No flashy cars, no magazine spreads, no bodyguards in designer suits, because Vicente understood one thing. The more they see you, the easier it is to kill you. So he became what his enemies feared most, a shadow. And from that shadow, he ruled with precision, not with rage, not with charisma, but with silence, structure, and system. He turned the Juarez cartel into a machine, cold, efficient, untouchable. And while the rest of Mexico fought over headlines, Vicente was building an empire of whispers, because power that speaks too loudly doesn't last, but power that watches, waits, and strikes only when necessary, that kind of power becomes legend. Ciudad Juarez, a border town stitched together with steel and desperation. Just across the river, El Paso, Texas. Two worlds divided by fences, but connected by greed. In the early 2000s, Juarez wasn't just a city, It was the vein through which the lifeblood of the Mexican drug trade flowed. Drugs went north, guns came south, money moved both ways, and Vicente Carrillo Fuentes sat at the center of it all. Unseen, unheard, unquestioned. He didn't need to raise his voice, because Juarez had already been taught to listen. But peace in the drug world is a mirage, temporary, delicate. And when the Sinaloa cartel, led by El Chapo and his lieutenants, made a move to seize control of Juarez's golden corridor, the streets turned red. Vicente didn't blink. He responded the way ghosts do, without warning, without mercy. He weaponized the streets. La Línea, his personal enforcement arm, was unleashed. But these weren't polished hitmen. They were former cops, military defectors, men who didn't ask questions. They made people disappear. And when that wasn't enough, Vicente turned to the Barrio Azteca gang. Prison-born, street-hardened, loyal only to blood and fear. Together they turned Juarez into hell on earth. 2008 to 2012. More than 10,000 dead. Heads left on school steps. Shootouts in broad daylight, in front of children, in front of cameras. Entire neighborhoods became ghost towns. Journalists were hunted. Cops were burned alive. Even mayors refused to leave their homes. And the message was simple. This city belongs to the cartel. But what made Vicente different wasn't just his brutality. It was his control. While chaos ruled the streets, he kept the flow going. Drugs still crossed the border on schedule. Planes still landed. Bribes were still paid. It wasn't madness, it was strategy. He allowed the chaos, because chaos covers footprints. And while the world watched the blood, he counted the cash. Juarez became the murder capital of the world. But for Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, it was just business. A business model built on fear, maintained through silence, perfected with death. In the drug world, peace is a pause, a smoke break before the next bullet. And by 2008, the pause was over. The Sinaloa cartel, ruthless, rich, and expanding, set its sights on Juarez, on the billion-dollar bridge into America. And Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, he was standing on that bridge, alone. El Chapo wanted it all, the routes, the crossings, the control, but Vicente wasn't giving up anything. He didn't issue threats, he issued orders, and the city, Ciudad Juarez, became a chessboard soaked in gasoline. Sinaloa moved in with muscle and firepower. Vicente responded with La Línea, his enforcers in military-grade trucks, patrolling like death squads. When that wasn't enough, he unleashed Barrio Azteca, a street gang turned paramilitary. They didn't fight for honor. They fought for purpose. And for paychecks soaked in blood. What followed was not a turf war, it was urban warfare. Drive-by shootings at traffic lights, grenades tossed into bars, corpses hanging from overpasses, entire families executed in their homes. No one was off limits, not cops, not reporters, not civilians. By 2010, Juarez was ground zero, an open-air graveyard. The murder rates skyrocketed. Hospitals overflowed. Schools closed. Even the police chief resigned after being given 24 hours to quit or die. His deputies were murdered one by one until he got the message. And still, Vicente never appeared. No press, no photos, just shadows. Because for him, this wasn't about blood. It was about principle. The Sinaloa cartel operated with flash. Vicente operated with discipline. Sinaloa sent sicarios with gold chains and rap lyrics. Vicente sent ghosts with silencers. They thought they could buy the city. He burned it instead. And while the streets were on fire, the drug flow didn't stop. Truckloads kept crossing the border. Planes still took off under the stars, and the cash kept stacking. Because Vicente knew control isn't about who kills more, it's about who survives longer. But the war took its toll. By 2012, Juarez was broken, a city in ruins, a generation lost, and both cartels still standing. Weaker, meaner, more paranoid than ever. But there was one difference. Sinaloa wanted the spotlight. Vicente never did. He didn't want to be a king. He wanted to be a constant. A man whose power didn't scream. It just existed. And in the darkest corners of Mexico, his silence was still louder than gunfire. He ruled for nearly 2 decades, without a camera flash, without a viral video, without leaving fingerprints. While others craved fame, Vicente Carrillo Fuentes built power like a mason lays stone, quietly, carefully, permanently. But in the world of narcos, even shadows have an expiration date. By 2013, the ground beneath him had shifted. The war with Sinaloa had drained his ranks. His lieutenants were dead, captured, or flipping. The government, backed by American intelligence, was hunting him with satellites and cell phone triangulation. Vicente had always been a ghost, but now, the walls were closing in. He moved constantly. No phones, no digital trail, just burner numbers and old-school signals. A knock, a glance, a scratch behind the ear. He stopped trusting lieutenants. He started trusting no one. Every meeting was a risk. Every silence felt like betrayal. He wasn't ruling anymore. He was surviving. And then, it happened. October 9th, 2014. Torreon, Coahuila, the city where he was born, now the city where he fell. Mexican federal police closed in. No shootout, no barricade, no final stand. He was riding in a gray pickup truck, simple, quiet, unmarked. A man who once controlled billions, now dressed like a mechanic on his way to nowhere. They pulled him out. No resistance, no drama. He looked tired, not defeated, but finished. The arrest didn't make global headlines. There were no fireworks, because Vicente never gave the world a show. But in the narco world, it was an earthquake. The last true architect of the old cartel order was now in chains. And yet, no one celebrated, because Vicente Carrillo Fuentes didn't fall like a king. He vanished like a system, collapsing from within. The Juarez cartel fractured. Some factions joined Sinaloa. Others went rogue. La Línea devolved into chaos. Barrio Azteca turned into just another street gang. But the vacuum left behind, still deadly, because Vicente didn't just run a cartel, he ran a structure. And when that structure cracked, violence didn't disappear, it multiplied, and he never spoke a word. No interviews, no memoir, no last message, just silence. The same silence that once ruled Juarez. They say when a tyrant dies, his empire dies with him. But in Mexico, that's never the full story. Vicente Carrillo Fuentes may have been captured in silence, but what he built still speaks. The Juarez cartel didn't disappear overnight. It splintered. Fractures formed within hours of his arrest. His old lieutenants turned rivals. Mid-level commanders saw opportunity where they once saw loyalty. La Línea, his enforcer arm, morphed into something else. No longer a disciplined paramilitary force, just a gang, hungry, unstable, predictably unpredictable. The plazas he once controlled with surgical precision, now battlegrounds. Juarez didn't heal after his fall. It bled differently. Killings continued. Extortion exploded. And the police? Still outgunned, still outpaid, still outmaneuvered. The narco state Vicente had helped design, one where fear replaced law, where cartels were courts, where loyalty was measured in blood, remained intact. Because Vicente hadn't just trafficked cocaine, he trafficked an idea that a man with no spotlight could still rule the stage. That terror applied correctly becomes infrastructure. That silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And that blueprint, others adopted it. While younger cartel bosses chased social media followers, Vicente's playbook passed into darker hands. Low profile, high violence, deep corruption, minimal noise. It became the gold standard of invisible power. Even in prison, his shadow lingered. Rumors swirled about secret messages passed through lawyers, about factions still loyal, about political favors owed from decades past. Was he still pulling strings? No one could say. But in Juarez, his name still made people pause, not out of nostalgia, but out of memory. The kind of memory that keeps your doors locked, that keeps your voice down at night, the kind that reminds you, some men don't need to scream to be heard, and Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, he was one of them. 80X Florence, Colorado, USA, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, where the walls don't echo, they swallow sound, no sunlight, no human contact, just concrete, steel, and memory. This is where Vicente Carrillo Fuentes now exists, not lives, exists. 23 hours a day in solitary, 1 hour in a cage under sky. No calls, no visitors, no deals, just time, stretching longer than any sentence ever written. For a man who once ruled cities with whispers, the silence here is different. Not power, not strategy, just absence. They called him inmate 587330079 now. But the guards know, the inmates know, even the walls seem to know. He wasn't just a trafficker, he was the mind behind the massacre. The architect of fear in a time when cartels stopped being criminals and became governments. He doesn't speak, not to press, not to lawyers, not to history. But in Mexico, his voice still lingers in alleyways and morgues. In Juarez, old-timers still whisper his name when bodies show up without explanation. Not because he's active, but because his rules never truly disappeared. His ghost lives in the way police hesitate before entering certain neighborhoods, in the way journalists still double-lock their doors, in the way rival gangs use his tactics like scripture. Vicente didn't just leave behind a cartel, he left behind a formula for silence, for fear, for control without chaos. He didn't write books, didn't chase fame, didn't leave a manifesto. But his legacy, it's engraved in concrete, in blood, in the air over Ciudad Juarez. And though he may die alone in that fortress, no funeral, no last words, his shadow will outlive him. Because Vicente Carrillo Fuentes didn't become a martyr. He became something more enduring, a ghost. Not every ghost haunts houses, some haunt nations. Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, the man who ruled in silence and left the world quieter, but never safer.